In the world's most peaceful fishing village, a 40-ton giant whale is sinking boats one by one. But when you learn this whale's true purpose, everything you think about the oceans will completely change. The morning mist clung to the harbor of Nordvik like a ghostly shroud, its tendrils weaving between the weathered wooden docks where fishing boats bobbed gently in the calm waters. This remote Norwegian village, nestled between towering fjords and endless ocean, had been home to generations of fishermen who had learned to read the sea like an open book. For over 2 centuries, the relationship between the villagers and the ocean had been one of mutual respect and understanding. That morning, however, something had changed. The usual sounds of seagulls and creaking boat hulls were replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to press against the ears of anyone who dared to venture near the water's edge. The old fishermen, men whose faces were etched with lines from decades of squinting into ocean spray, stood clustered on the dock, their weathered hands gripping steaming cups of coffee as they stared out at the gray expanse of water. Eric Magnusson, the village's most experienced fisherman, stood apart from the group, his pale blue eyes scanning the horizon with the intensity of a man who had spent 40 years reading the ocean's moods. His thick gray beard, streaked with white from years of salt spray, trembled slightly as he spoke to the gathered crowd. 3 boats in 3 weeks, he said, his voice carrying the weight of disbelief. The Nordstorm, the Sea Maiden, and yesterday, the Aurora, all of them experienced crews, all of them destroyed by the same creature. The fishermen exchanged glances, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and confusion. These were men who had faced North Atlantic storms, who had battled equipment failures in freezing waters, who had stared death in the face more times than they cared to remember. But this was different. This was something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the ocean they had called home for their entire lives. Anna Lindquist, the village's marine biologist who had arrived 6 months earlier as part of a government research program, stood at the edge of the group, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. She had dedicated her life to studying marine life, but the reports she had been receiving defied everything she had learned about whale behavior. The creature responsible for the attacks was described as a massive whale, easily 40 tons, with distinctive markings that made it instantly recognizable. The pattern doesn't make sense, she murmured to herself, flipping through pages of notes and sketches. Whales don't attack boats unprovoked. There has to be a reason. The attacks had begun 3 weeks earlier when the Nordstorm, a sturdy fishing vessel that had weathered countless storms, had been found floating upside down 5 miles from shore. The crew had been rescued by a passing vessel, but their accounts of the attack had been almost impossible to believe. They described a massive whale that had appeared from nowhere, ramming their boat with such force that it had been lifted completely out of the water. The second attack had been even more shocking. The Sea Maiden, captained by one of the village's most skilled fishermen, had been destroyed in broad daylight within sight of the harbor. Witnesses on shore had watched in horror as the enormous whale had surfaced directly beneath the boat, its massive bulk rising from the depths like a living mountain. The impact had been so violent that debris from the boat had been scattered across nearly a mile of ocean, but it was the third attack that had truly terrified the community. The Aurora, a modern fishing vessel equipped with the latest safety equipment, had been conducting routine operations when the whale had struck. This time, however, the attack had been different. Instead of a single devastating blow, the whale had circled the boat repeatedly, each pass bringing it closer, as if it was studying its prey. The crew had radioed frantically for help, describing how the whale seemed to be deliberately targeting specific parts of the vessel. It knew exactly what it was doing, the captain had reported, his voice shaking with fear. It wasn't random destruction, it was ... calculated, like it was trying to send a message. The village council had called an emergency meeting, and the small community center was packed with worried faces. Children pressed against windows, their eyes wide with fear as they listened to the adults discuss the creature that had turned their peaceful harbor into a place of terror. The fishing industry, which had sustained the village for generations, was grinding to a halt as boat after boat remained tied to the dock, their crews unwilling to risk another encounter with the mysterious whale. Mayor Gunnar Olsen, a stocky man in his 60s whose family had lived in Nordvik for 4 generations, stood before the assembled crowd. His usually steady voice carried a tremor of uncertainty as he addressed the community's concerns. "We have contacted the Coast Guard, the Marine Research Institute, and the Government Wildlife Department," he announced, "but they tell us that what we're describing is impossible. Whales don't behave this way, they don't target human vessels." An elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. "My grandmother used to tell stories about the sea taking revenge on those who took too much from it. Maybe we've pushed too hard, taken too many fish." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but Anna Lindquist shook her head firmly. "Whales don't seek revenge," she said, her voice carrying the authority of scientific training. "They're intelligent creatures, yes, but they don't form emotional attachments to territory or food sources in the way humans do. There has to be a biological explanation." The debate continued for hours, with some villagers calling for hunting parties to track down and destroy the whale, while others argued for evacuation until the creature moved on to different waters. But Anna remained convinced that understanding the whale's behavior was the key to resolving the crisis that evening. As the sun set over the fjords, casting long shadows across the harbor, Anna made her way to the small research station she had established on the outskirts of the village. Her equipment was basic but functional, and she had been using it to monitor marine life in the area for months. What she discovered in her data would change everything. The whale's attacks weren't random. They were following a pattern, occurring at specific times and locations that corresponded to something Anna had been tracking for months. The creature was showing up during the peak migration periods of a specific species of fish, and its attacks were concentrated in areas where fishing boats had been most active. But there was something else in the data that made Anna's blood run cold. The whale's sonar calls, which she had been recording for weeks, weren't the typical feeding or navigation sounds that whales normally made. They were distress calls, repeated over and over with increasing desperation. The whale wasn't attacking out of aggression or territorial behavior. It was crying for help. The next morning, Anna requested permission to take a small research boat out to study the whale more closely. The village council was reluctant to approve such a dangerous mission, but Anna's determination eventually convinced them. She would use specialized underwater microphones to record the whale's calls and try to understand what was driving its behavior. As her small boat cut through the morning waves, Anna felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had studied whales for years, but she had never been this close to such a large and apparently aggressive creature. The water around her boat was eerily calm, with no sign of the massive predator that had terrorized the village. She didn't have to wait long. The whale surfaced 200 yards from her boat, its massive form breaking the surface with a sound like thunder. Anna had seen whales before, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer size and power of this creature. It was easily the largest whale she had ever encountered, its scarred hide telling stories of battles fought in the deepest parts of the ocean. But what struck her most was the whale's behavior. Instead of the aggressive posturing she had expected, the creature seemed almost defeated. It floated on the surface, its massive eye visible above the waterline, and Anna could swear she saw something almost human in its gaze. Pain, desperation, and a kind of pleading that made her heart ache. Using her underwater microphones, Anna began recording the whale's calls. What she heard confirmed her worst fears. The whale wasn't making aggressive sounds or territorial warnings. It was making the same distress call over and over, a sound that any marine biologist would recognize as a mother calling for her young dot. As Anna listened to the recording, the pieces began to fall into place. The whale wasn't attacking boats out of aggression or hunger. It was a mother, desperately searching for her calf, and the fishing boats were interfering with her search. The timing of the attacks, the locations, the apparent intelligence behind the creature's actions, it all made sense now. But where was the calf? Anna studied her charts and marine traffic reports, looking for any clue that might explain the young whale's disappearance. What she found in the shipping records made her stomach turn. 3 weeks earlier, a large marine mammal had been reported caught in commercial fishing nets 20 miles offshore. The animal had been freed, but it had been injured and disoriented. Anna realized with growing horror that the fishing boats had inadvertently separated a mother whale from her calf. The young whale, injured and confused, had likely been swept away by currents, while the mother had been frantically searching the area where she had last seen her baby. The boat attacks weren't random violence. They were the desperate actions of a mother trying to find her child. The mother whale had been ramming fishing boats because she associated them with the disappearance of her calf. In her mind, these vessels were either responsible for taking her baby or were somehow preventing her from finding it. Every boat that entered her search area was seen as a potential threat or obstacle to her reunion with her offspring. Anna's hands shook as she realized the full implications of her discovery. The whale wasn't a monster terrorizing the village, it was a grieving mother, driven to desperate measures by the loss of her child. The attacks would continue until she either found her calf or exhausted herself to death in the search. Racing back to shore, Anna called an emergency meeting with the village council. She presented her findings with the urgency of someone who had just discovered a ticking time bomb. The room fell silent as she explained the whale's true motivation, and Anna could see the mix of shame and sorrow on the faces of the fishermen who had unknowingly contributed to this tragedy. "We have to help her find her calf," Anna said, her voice filled with determination. "It's the only way to stop the attacks. If we can locate the young whale and reunite it with its mother, the crisis will end." The village council agreed to organize a search effort, but the task seemed impossible. The North Atlantic was vast, and a single whale calf could be anywhere within hundreds of square miles. They would need boats, sonar equipment, and most importantly, the cooperation of every fishing vessel in the region. Over the following days, the village transformed into a coordination center for the largest marine search operation in the area's history. Fishing boats that had been hiding in the harbor ventured out in formation, their crews using sonar equipment to scan the waters for any sign of the missing calf. The Coast Guard provided additional resources, and marine biologists from across Norway arrived to assist with the search. Anna remained in constant contact with the search teams, coordinating their efforts and monitoring the mother whale's movements. The creature had become less aggressive since the search began, as if she somehow understood that the humans were now trying to help rather than hinder her efforts. On the fourth day of the search, a fishing boat reported sonar contact with what appeared to be a whale calf approximately 30 miles northeast of the village. The young whale was alive but appeared to be trapped in an underwater canyon, unable to find its way back to open water. Anna joined the rescue team, bringing specialized equipment designed to guide marine mammals safely through underwater obstacles. When they reached the location, they found the calf exactly as described, a young whale, no more than a few months old, circling helplessly in the narrow confines of an underwater canyon. The rescue operation was delicate and dangerous. The calf was frightened and disoriented, and any sudden movements could cause it to panic and injure itself further. Using underwater speakers, Anna played recordings of the mother whale's calls, hoping to calm the young whale and guide it toward the canyon opening. Slowly, carefully, the rescue team worked to create a path for the calf to follow. They used boats to form a gentle corridor guiding the young whale toward deeper water where it could safely navigate. After hours of painstaking work, the calf finally swam free of its underwater prison. The reunion between mother and calf was a moment that brought tears to the eyes of even the most hardened fishermen. The massive mother whale appeared as if from nowhere, her calls of joy echoing across the water as she and her offspring swam in circles around each other. The calf, no longer alone and frightened, responded with its own calls of recognition and relief. As the two whales swam together toward the open ocean, Anna felt a profound sense of accomplishment and humility. The crisis that had threatened to destroy the village's way of life had been resolved not through violence or force, but through understanding and compassion. The cursed whale had been revealed as a loving mother, and the community had learned a valuable lesson about the complex relationships between humans and marine life. The story of the whale mother and her calf spread rapidly through marine research communities and environmental groups around the world. Nordvik became a symbol of successful human-wildlife cooperation, demonstrating that even the most seemingly impossible conflicts could be resolved through patience, understanding, and a willingness to see beyond surface appearances. Anna established a permanent research station in the village, monitoring marine life and working to prevent similar incidents in the future. The fishing community implemented new protocols for dealing with marine mammal encounters, and the village became a model for sustainable fishing practices that respected the ocean's complex ecosystems. Months later, reports began arriving of whale sightings in the area. The mother and calf had returned to the waters near Nordvik, but now they were accompanied by a small pod of other whales. The mother had not only found her child but had also found a new family. The whales were often seen feeding peacefully near the village, their presence no longer a source of fear but a reminder of the ocean's capacity for both power and grace. The fishermen of Nordvik returned to their traditional occupation, but they carried with them a new understanding of their relationship with the sea. They had learned that the ocean was not just a resource to be exploited but a living system, filled with creatures that experienced loss, joy, and love just as humans did. Anna continued her research, but she never forgot the lesson the whale mother had taught her. The natural world was full of mysteries and complexities that could not be understood through scientific observation alone. Sometimes, the most important discoveries came not from data and analysis, but from empathy and a willingness to see the world through another creature's eyes. The whale attacks had ended not with harpoons or explosives, but with the simple recognition that a mother's love was the same whether it belonged to a human or a whale. In the end, the cursed whale had brought a blessing to the village, a deeper understanding of the connections that bind all living creatures together in the vast web of life. As the seasons changed and the story of the whale mother became part of the village's oral history, the people of Nordvik would often pause in their daily work to scan the horizon for signs of their massive neighbors. When the whales were spotted, work would stop, and the entire community would gather to watch the magnificent creatures swimming in the waters that had once been a source of terror, but were now a symbol of hope and understanding. The tale of the cursed whale had become a testament to the power of compassion over fear, understanding over ignorance, and love over violence. In a world where human-wildlife conflicts were becoming increasingly common, the village of Nordvik had shown that another way was possible, a way that honored both the needs of human communities and the complex emotional lives of the creatures that shared their world.